Time for the council liaison report.
Right. We can always come back to you after if you wanted to make any announcements. But we can always come back to you after you, unless you have any announcements.
I do not have any.
All right. Any other announcements from anybody? Okay, so the next item will be general public comment. So at this time, any member of the public may step forward to address the commission on matters that are not listed on this particular agenda. Each item scheduled for action or discussion that is on the agenda will have a separate public comment period to follow. Speakers are limited to no more than 3 minutes, and we ask that you please state your name for the record.
So my name is Ning Wan. I have been this your commission a few times. I served as a commissioner for the Historical Resources and Management Commission for like almost 5 years, but that commission was dismissed. I want to make some comments on today. Yes, first I want to make everybody aware I'm a Chinese American. And I noticed, the Chinese spies and the code of CIA is Confucius start with C, and the Institute start with I, and the agents. The most like time the surveillance Chinese people, but it's kind of infiltrated to American society. I want to make people aware the communist is often us and they're non-human. And at this time, I believe my goal, I want to share some view with everyone. I write in Chinese because I'm dealing with a lot of Chinese dissidents. I'm a dissident of Chinese Communist Party. It's found your last name because in Chinese last name is a woman plus a life, put together. It's a woman and a life, and found your sex. Because sex is the fundamental for humanity to survive. We need to have birth rate. We need to have babies. We need to have a real community. I went through a lot of difficulties after, I was evicted from Ranchero as a senior. I paid the full price for my mobile home, but I believe that not even American law enforcement, I believe the Chinese spies, made that happen because it's totally illegal. I've never been in court. There's no eviction notice, but there were like a chef in the uniform and just locked me out of my home. And then the police, I believe the ICE, the communist, agents, chasing me, say you cannot get it back to Ranchero. That's why I'm still, living in a hotel. I'm good. I'm fortunate enough, I have enough money to stay at Hilton. It's very expensive, but I've been stayed there for 2 months. And then I discount to social works. I have a question about who actually is living in this L Street. Have 2 new half plans on like empty lot is 1208 L Street. It's a new house, it's a half flat. I was wondering, how city assigned this and who has the privilege to live there? Is it still empty? Can I have a temporary housing in facility if the city has some empty, houses in my situation? Okay, yeah. One more thing about homeless is it's okay for homeless to use the electricity outlet at the Central Park because I live in a hotel. I want to be able to cook it with an air fryer or something. I was wondering about that. Okay, thank you.
Any other in-person public comments? And are there any written in-person general public comments?
No.
All right, so the next item is the consent calendar. So the only item on the consent calendar is the February 23rd to the 26th meeting minutes. So did everybody get a chance to review the minutes? All right, may I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, so I have a first and a second, and all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Noes? All right. So the February 23rd minutes are approved unanimously. Okay, and then the next item is the bulk of today will be the public hearing for the federal fiscal year 2026-2027 CDBG home funds. So this is a public hearing, so we'll gavel this in. And Director Bailey.
All right. Thank you, Commissioners. As you know, we are now in the process of determining our expenditures for CDBG and home for fiscal year 26-27. I'll remind you that for the last couple of years, we've had a very unusual situation. Typically, our process is to open a NOFA, a Notice of Funding Opportunity, which we usually do sometime around September. We let agencies know that there's funding that is available. They can apply, and we review those applications, and we forward a recommendation. For the 26 year, we had no indication from HUD that we were going to be funded. And matter of fact, we learned that our funding allocation was coming to us in January of this year. So we essentially went 6 months without understanding whether or not we would have the funding to serve the organizations that we said that we were going to serve. Last year, because we knew that there were a number of changes, we weren't clear what the changes were going to be, and we wanted to make sure that the agencies that we had funded in the past, we knew that their circumstances hadn't changed, that they, through our monitoring, we knew that they were still following the guidelines and submitting invoices and requests for services in a timely manner. Because of that, just to provide them with some level of continuity, we funded the same agencies from 24-25 and 25-26. We are still in a place of uncertainty. When we received the letter from HUD that said that they were going to allocate the funds to us for 25-26, the contract came with a number of new requirements. Those requirements are under review by our legal team right now, just to make sure that we can still move forward in the way that we've been moving. But in light of the uncertainty that we're seeing, staff is suggesting that we again this year fund the agencies that we had funded in the past. And what you have in front of you is a list of you can see what our 25-26 allocations were. You can see what we're suggesting for 26-27, and there really isn't much of a change. We're hoping to do the same thing, and that's just for our regular CDBG, our regular CDBG components. So up at the top, as a reminder, we can take 20% of our CDBG allocation just for administration. Part of that we'll be using for administrative purposes. Part of it we'll continue to use for fair housing, to continue to provide fair housing. Public services are limited to 15% of the grant. So even though we're getting a total of $730,000 in CDBG, only 15% of that can be used for services. And so we're going to continue to serve the agencies that are listed here. It's staff's recommendation that we focus on these particular agencies because we know that a number of them have lost funding recently. So this allows them some certainty for at least the upcoming year. And then we still have a set aside for CDBG facilities and for our new economic development team. Council just approved the city's economic development plan last week. And so there are a number of programs and things that the economic development director would like to do. We're gonna provide a little funding to kick that off. And then we'll maintain some funding in public facilities. Haven't determined if specifically where that would go, but we also have a number of projects that we think we may want to support. And then finally, we haven't proposed any changes for home as of yet. For home funding, those funds are primarily for acquisition, rehabilitation, and development and new construction of housing. We know that we've got a number of developers that have recently come to us looking for local support. So we're implementing a process for those developers to submit an application over the counter to tell us, yes, we have a housing project here in town, but we may need local support to go after some other state funding or tax credits or things like that. We want to make sure that we just want to make sure that when we're getting these requests, we're kind of keeping them in order and we're providing them with the process. So we're implementing a new over-the-counter process to address our home funds. So I'm asking for a couple of things right now. One of which is, because it's not so easy to see, but is the commission agreeable to making a recommendation to council that we maintain our existing process? That's the one thing. If you are, then what we do is from the SSC, from you guys, it will go over to council. Council will also open a public hearing because these are public dollars and determine whether or not they'll accept the recommendation. And then they will provide feedback and direction to move forward. And then once they've done that, then we submit our request to HUD. And just as a reminder, here are the priorities and goals that we set for the expenditure of CDBG and home funds. And you'll see that at the top level, it's a lot of things that are related, that are housing related. Our goals are to increase affordable housing options, preserve our housing stock, supportive housing for vulnerable populations, and combat discrimination. You'll see here in the middle, these are more related to things that we do related to services. You know, how are we going to reduce insecurity? If there are urgent needs, how do we address that? And then how do we build community partnerships? The blue boxes are the things that we're intending to do for economic development. And then through facilities, these are typically the types of projects that we do here. How do we increase accessible spaces, ADA spaces, or remove barriers to space? So those are in our 5-year consolidated plan, those are our priority goals. We're still addressing those. So I just wanted to remind everyone that that was the target. It's difficult to make decisions about our funding choices when the funding landscape is changing so rapidly. There's the federal changes that are happening. We're seeing state level changes. The county is grappling with its own budgetary issues. And we're seeing all of that pressure impacting the services that are being provided in Davis. Last year, we started the process to implement Davis's own homeless strategic plan. We had an action team that was really kind of trying to determine, you know, where do we want to be, what do we think is happening. That team consisted of representatives from Communicare, from DJUSD, from the Housing Authority, from our service providers, from the seniors community, from the domestic violence community, from youth and child and family services providers. And we sat in the room and we were trying to determine, you know, which goals and which priorities do we want to address. And as we were doing that, all of these changes started to snowball. And what recognized in that process is that a number of our providers are in the process of determining what can they afford to focus on, where are their holes, and do they need to adjust what it is that they're doing. They're all doing that level of determination, and we wanted to give them the space to do that, to get a better understanding of where they thought their budgets were going to be and where they would need to ask for support, before we kind of dug in with our homeless strategic plan, which was addressing just the unhoused, and we still have other target areas that we need to look at as well. So we're still in that process. Part of that is working with the county and looking at where they are, what's going to be available countywide, and how that's going to impact what's going to be available here in Davis. Unfortunately, it's very squishy in a lot of places, but the thing that we do have in place is everyone is very open in their communications about what is possible for them to do, what may no longer be possible for them to do, and where we need to team up to either apply for funding together or shore up those agencies that are doing this work, and how do we shore them up. So those are conversations that we're having. So one of the things I wanted to have the commission think about, again, we get about $730,000 in total for our public services. We get about $109,000 of that $730,000 for public services. What kind of an impact are we making for these agencies when we're giving them these small amounts of funding? Is this where we want to be, or do we want to focus on a particular area that may be unsupported right now or not seeing as much support? One of the things that we're seeing that is some of the dollars that are going away are prevention dollars. So it kind of moved away from that. Some of the places where there are more options for funding, the workforce. It's a matter of how do we want to have the biggest bang for our buck. So I'm going to do some more research and bring you, here are some agencies that are doing work in Davis. Here are what they're saying, where the need is, and then I'd like the commission to think about is, do we need to be consolidating during these tough times to kind of shore up the system that we have in place, and what does that look like? And maybe not for 26, 27, but for 27, 28 for sure. I think it's important that we have a good understanding of what the need is here in Davis, and where we're seeing that need, and where we can come alongside and support places that maybe aren't seeing the kind of support that they need. So, just a thought. And again, our typical process is it's a NOFA and their applications, and we're inviting folks to come in and apply, but it's at this point, everyone's really looking at what do we want to do specifically here in Davis? What can we do? Can we do it? For some of our agencies, it's with their regional agencies, and they're looking at, so what can we do in Davis, or can we do in Davis? And we just don't have the bandwidth to do anymore. But who does have the bandwidth to do it in Davis? So those are questions that we could be considering. So with that, that's my presentation, and there's my recommendation, and then we can, up to you, Mr. Chair, do you want to take the discussion first, or do you want to do public comments?
Any clarifying questions, I guess?
I have a question. So I remember we did this process, I think, for 24, 25. That was the last time that we really like reviewed the applications. And I can't remember, were there any organizations that asked for funding that we didn't grant funding to?
I think there was one, 24, 25, I think. We got a request from a student organization at UCD,
Oh, okay.
but we can't support student organizations, so.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like if, I mean, I understand why we want to continue with the same, as last year. I think it makes sense to maintain the continuity in the face of everything else changing in funding landscape. But just thinking like, I don't know if we've been receiving reports from the agencies and if they've had like changes in programmatic activities that might influence how we fund them or changes in costs. I mean, I'm sure like most of them are still doing the same thing and things cost the same or more, but just wondering what you've heard about like any changes to programming or changes in costs, aside from the obvious that it's gone up probably.
The biggest thing that we're hearing is people are struggling with staffing. Usually that's the biggest expense that organizations have. So their ability to maintain staffing has been tough. Some agencies, the populations that they serve are now under scrutiny. So we've got a lot of agencies that serve immigrants. We've got agencies that serve LGBTQ. And so some of the contracts that they have are also have the language that they're struggling with as well. So those are the two big things that we're hearing from the agencies that we're working with. And the cost of operations for agencies just continues to climb. From our local shelters, the cost of operating buildings is going through the roof. If you think PG&E bills are bad, you should take some of theirs. Unexpected increases related to energy costs. So we're starting to get some of our reporting in now because it's, again, we were just able to confirm with them that we can pay you in January. So,
Thank you.
Well, first of all, I have some questions, but just on that last comment about the agencies and these staffing concerns, most of my employment has been in the social services arena, and I spent most of last year unemployed, applying to the handful of jobs at these local agencies, and so many of them that, not to like toot my own horn, but like in a past season, just getting into the interview, okay, I've sort of guaranteed the job at that point, but like the sort of skittishness with which sort of every social services agency that I interviewed with in the local area was with sort of hiring anybody, even in these positions that they had already put out, that they clearly needed people, programming wise, it sort of, one, I was like, oh shoot, I really need a job. But then number two, I was like, wow, this really speaks to a really rough situation that's going, rippling across our community with regard to social services. So I just wanted to sort of add my personal experiences to that last situation. Director Bailey, you mentioned in your report that prevention dollars are going away. I just wanted to sort of ask you to put a little bit more meat on the bone there. Were you talking about just the general sort of grant environment, or were you talking about specifically with regard to other cities and localities and what they've received with regard to community development block grant?
it's mostly, it's grants, and primarily from the federal level and from the state level. So the focus has shifted from, for a few years, we've been trying to move upstream and trying to catch people before they fall into homelessness. Because of the shift at the federal level, that is more focused on, okay, we're going to be, we're going to focus on people that have maybe chronic conditions, once they have them. So if you've got a severe mental illness or substance abuse disorder, then that's going to be the focus. So that's where the eye is kind of shifted. At the county level, we're seeing that a lot of dollars that were in social services kind of arenas are moving towards behavioral health for that reason. And state dollars have shifted more towards a behavioral health platform. So things that we may have done before, how do we stabilize rents for people, or how do we help with PG&E, those kinds of things. They may be funded, but the funding has been reduced drastically because that's where the lens is shifting. But what I haven't heard yet is we're hearing what's happening with public dollars. I'm not hearing what's happening with private dollars at foundations and, what direction they're going in, but, foundations are also under pressure right now, too. So, that's what I meant by, and on a county level and on a city level, we can see the difference that prevention makes. But unfortunately, the funding for that it's not, there's just not as much funding for it as there used to be.
Thank you. I appreciate what you said in your report about, maybe in future fiscal years, we should consider, our sort of spooning out a little bit, so a couple of dollars here and there to different agencies might be, especially in a time like this, we might have to reconsider that approach to maybe sort of concentrate, support to one particular agency that's particularly in need. I look forward to engaging in that conversation should we get to that. But it made me wonder how other cities, I know you have a past in social services and other communities, and so I'm wondering if you know how other cities and localities, particularly in California, are adjusting to this sort of scarce funding environment for social services, and if there's any sort of lessons to learn from maybe how other communities are experiencing this.
Well, some cities are with much larger budgets, so they have more to kind of divvy around in a different manner. I've seen some cities are kind of foregoing that process at all and focusing in on, again, if they have a specific project that they want to prioritize, they're moving away from the NOFA and just saying the city's going to pour all of its money into making sure the shelter stays open, or making sure that, outreach is happening. And we're not doing this kind of targeted approach. So it is kind of a mixed bag. For jurisdictions that have larger budgets, they're able to shuffle a lot more. I've also seen that in some jurisdictions, there's a federal amount, and then there's some jurisdictions that are also providing a general fund amount, where we'll take general fund and do some of the little agencies at smaller amounts, and then with the federal dollars, we're gonna do big impact things. But even that's under strain because so many jurisdictions' budgets, the general fund dollars are shrinking too. So it's really tough right now I don't know anyone that's standing up any new programs at all, because they're so uncertain, they don't know what's going to happen. And everyone is trying to figure out, how do we just stabilize what we have, so we're not reaching to reduce right away, but planning that at some point we may have to make some really tough choices.
Thank you. And then, obviously we're in a rough situation. Let's say by some, Hanukkah miracle next fiscal year, we are not in this situation. I'm just kind of wondering, would y'all have, just given our need environment, sort of separate from the federal situation, would y'all have recommended something different than this?
Yeah, we'd have done our regular process if the dollars weren't changing so much. I would have asked the question because my understanding is from previous commissions, there has been some talk about, whether or not these minimum funding amounts that we're doing, if they're having an impact. But, no real decision was made. I know at one point, the minimum grant that we were making eligible was like $5,000, and we moved it up to $7,000 as a minimum. But, you know, given how much more expensive things are now, just whether or not that's doing much good. But, you know, the best way to kind of get that information, we have really, with all of these agencies here, we have really good relationships. And so, you know, as part of our liaison process, we can go in and just have these conversations with them, because everyone is having this conversation right now. So it's a good time to go in and talk with folks to go, okay, so what do you need? What do you suggest? And the standard question on all applications right now, if we couldn't fund you in full, what would it take to keep you operational?
Rough times.
Really
Yeah.
Thank you.
choices,
Thank you, Dana. Can you elaborate a little bit more on, just to help me understand the home, you did explain a little bit, but like maybe a specific example of who used those affordable housing development funds in the last year? Just trying to figure out.
So I can tell you what we've allocated some funds to. Like we've got new affordable housing projects. We've put a little money into Adelante, an apartment complex. We've committed some funds to Bretton Woods, the senior complex. We've got a number of different developers that are doing other projects that are looking for construction dollars right now to kind of bridge gaps. So some of those development projects that are in the pipeline, we've got affordable housing, that specifically affordable housing developers that are saying the costs are crazy, we're gonna have to change how we're looking for funding. Is there some local support, which basically means can the city help out too? Is there some local support that we might be able to apply for? The nice thing is there have been some changes to how home dollars can be used. So I went to a recent seminar on, you know, the use of home funds. The one thing that was clear is that HUD is asking that we pay more attention to when developers and people are coming to ask us for home funds, finding out more about how are they building what they call their capital stack. You know, how are you pulling your money together to make this project happen? And HUD was very clear with home dollars. You need to have that information before you commit home dollars, because home dollars are last mile dollars. There's a hole, we can fill that hole. But you gotta tell us how you got to this hole, and why is it? And then how are you going to, you know, home is meant to be a revolving fund. So we loan it to you, you pay it back, we loan it back out. It should revolve. So what's the timeline for that revolving that's going to happen? And then there's, what I saw was that there are some cities that are using some of their home dollars to do what they call tenant-based rental assistance programs, which are not so much for the creation of the housing, but to help the people that are kind of trying to get to the housing. So it's looking at different options for the use of our home funds. And so those are some of the things that we're considering and talking about. Where do we want to be in that space? Because we do have home dollars that we have not committed as of yet. But, you know, you can see here, this last year we got $291,000, but we've got developers that are asking for millions. So we'd rather kind of pull together a big chunk of home funds, because this person is like, I have everything. I got my entitlements, I got an affordable housing developer that's ready to go, and I can get some tax credits, I've been approved for those, but I'm still short just this amount. And so when they're there, that's where we want to start talking about home dollars.
Thank you.
Dan, I just want to say first, like, I can see as we've been talking about this, that like, this has been weighing on you, or you're carrying it. So so I appreciate just all the work that you have done with this. I asked this just to understand, this is my first lap around, so to speak, with this kind of thing. If we didn't take the recommendation, is the alternative that we go towards a back to the bid process in some way?
We could reopen the bid process, but we have to have a decision to, even though they're late, we still have a deadline. So we have to give them, I have to get this in front of council, by no later than early May, so I can, or late April, so I can get it to HUD by May, and they can tell us what's gonna happen, so.
You've been alluding to it then, so if then we took the recommendation and appropriate funds just kind of roll over, so to speak, the allocation amounts, I would be curious to know like how the needs are evolving and thus like how maybe these funding might go towards responding to some of those needs, fully recognizing that these funds are inadequate to fully meet all the needs here to it, but just to hear some of that. It sounds like there's great conversation between organizations and city staff in your office. I would be curious to hear some of that as well, just what that looks like and what some of the data sources are on that.
So I can, and don't have any quantitative data for you right now, but I can tell you from what the agencies are talking not only to the city about, but to other partners. I know that Stake in particular, they're prevention dollars. And so they're, a lot of the dollars that they get are private dollars. So they're trying to make up donations and things like that, but of the public dollars that they do get, there's heartburn around some of the new requirements that are coming with the public dollars, particularly around the people that they're serving. I know that our Davis Community Meals and Housing is continuing to, operate their emergency shelter, and they're still doing their homeless outreach, but they're again faced with costs are rising at their location, Paul's Place. The shelter costs are rising. They've got 8 beds that they do, but those costs continue to grow. And they're trying to determine where do we need to be? What can we continue to do? And then all of the other organizations, there's smaller organizations. The bulk of their funding is public. So they're all under extreme pressure right now, and reaching out to us about is the money coming and what's happening. So I just know that these agencies in particular continue to serve specifically Davis. I know that there's, their ability to serve Davis because their staffing is kind of dropping a bit. It's getting tough. I know Yellow Children's Alliance used to have an office right here at 600A. We don't have that office here anymore. And I know that YCCC is also undergoing some changes too. So they're, they've got a new interim ED that's really looking at where they are and what they can do.
My last question, then I'll turn it over to the next. Is there a way to use some of these funding to help sustain some of these organizations? And I'm thinking in particular of like my day job, everything right now is around like how do we get reimbursement dollars and fee payer system and like get some of that reimbursement rate stuff. Is there a way that some of these dollars can help into something like that, if not that exactly?
So, not the city dollars, but all of these organizations are looking at what's available through CalAIM. That's the managed care providers and the CalAIM system. Becoming a enhanced care management provider is a process in itself. And though some agencies have considered it, it's a real slog. I know that Yellow Children's Alliance has become an enhanced care management providers, but they serve region and broad group of families that they can serve. Most of the others have looked at maybe not doing that route because, you know, I always remind people that managed care providers are insurance companies. So when you submit a claim to an insurance company, how does that go? You know, it's I'm submitting my claim, where's that T that you didn't cross? Move that back. People go, okay, I crossed the T, okay, but you forgot to do this, and then we did. And so their reimbursements are slow. And those are things that they have to consider, because if I'm going to become an enhanced care provider, say, I need someone that really knows medical billing, that is on top of that. That means another staff person to track all of it and really focus on getting us our money back, and then hoping that we get all of the money that we submit a claim for. So it's a thing. But those agencies that aren't doing enhanced care management are looking at, well, how can I be a community support because it's a lower level? But what does that look like? And then who do I serve as a community support? Because there are 14 specific things that I can do as a community support, and I have to make sure that can I do all of those things, or can I do just one of them, or what is that look like? So what I'm finding is that agencies are spending more time trying to find more resources just to keep themselves going. But the county was usually the mandated service where you can kind of count on that happening. So that's kind of drying up. So there's more looking at accounting and kind of trading off. It's like, do I have the capacity to even do that? So that's what agencies are, because of all of these changes, that's what agencies are looking at right now. I mean, they're really tough questions.
Thank you.
So, I'm looking at you, Sarah. And that's kind of how everybody feels.
That's daily.
But here's the thing. I tell people when I first came to Davis in 2022, I said, what I'm most afraid of is what's going to happen to us in 2026. And that was because, you know, in 2019, 2020, we had all this ARPA money and things, and so we tried new things, we were innovative. There were we were encouraged to be innovative. But we also knew that those weren't sustainable dollars. And the state wasn't saying that it was going to provide some pathway to sustainable dollars. And 2026 was going to be our kind of fiscal cliff. And a lot of these agencies knew that too, and they were trying to prepare for that. But they were preparing, and then we got a new administration that kind of went, cliff. So now they're adjusting to that. But the good news is all of these agencies, at least agencies you see here, they're legacy agencies. They've been through feast and famine. So we're just kind of going back to, you know, when we had to scramble and be more scrappy. So that's what they're going back to. But it's hard when you were being innovative and doing things to kind of, what can we try? How do we do these things? And now, we don't know if we can sustain those things. It's just tough.
I said that was the last question. Sorry. Is there ongoing discussion to, I'm gonna say like braid some of the support with other community, like you mentioned school district, I can imagine churches and community, you know, faith-based groups and whatnot, and to think about is there ways to braid a kind of continuum of funding.
And the state does a good job of putting out a list of funding, available funding, and we're all looking at how do we braid that funding, what's new. One of the things that the county's doing right now is making an adjustment to what they're calling Prop 1 dollars. That's having an impact, so what are the requirements for that? And what can we come along and shore up in that process? We are all talking about if you take care of this piece, then maybe I can come along and support this piece, and maybe together we can go after this piece. Those are the conversations that are happening right now. So yes, that's happening, but because it's budget season, Everybody's talking budgets right now and just trying to figure out where they are. People are, once we get a better picture of where people are, we can kind of start making some plans. And I'm thinking that it'll be May, June, when we're really going, okay, now we know what we got. Where do we want to go after? And then who needs to go after what? You know, what do the providers go after? Because they're providers, they can directly go after some things. What do the cities want to band together and go after? You know, okay, and as a county, what do we want to band together and go after? And who do we talk to make sure that when we're asking for these things, who's listening and can write checks?
No small thing.
So when would, so typically, so in September, we would start
The planning
the
process.
grant
for-
planning process. Just thinking about all these pieces, about prioritizing these sort of prevention
Mhm.
service, like, you know, adjusting the application so that we're, you know, kind of getting those as a priority, and then just the importance of us gathering, having those liaison meetings, so that, and maybe figuring out a way to make them streamlined, so we're asking some similar questions in order to feed that, application
Yes.
period.
Mhm.
Sounds like, yeah, we just need to,
Mhm.
there'll be a couple of conversations,
And we've got some time, right?
Yeah,
So, you
definitely.
know, when we start doing a community needs assessment around September, so that around October, we can let the community know, hey, by the way, the NOVA's coming out in December. And between, you know, October and December, we're gonna have a funding forum, so we can tell you what the process is going to look like and why. You know, so we've got some time to start building that, and some time to kind of look at what other cities may be doing that we like. And hearing from the organizations themselves, this is what we need.
All right, any other questions? Should we go to public comment and then we'll come back for discussion? Sounds good. All right, so any public comments on the item 6A, the public hearing regarding the CDBG funds? All right, I'm hearing them in person, any recorded? All right. Okay, so now for the discussion portion. I guess I'm thinking it might make sense to think about it in two parts. So I guess there's the what do we do for this current recommendation for the federal year 2026-2027 that you're proposing, Director Bailey, and then I guess there's this longer conversation about what do we do for the next year, and how we get ready for that September period is what I'm hearing. Is that right?
Mhm.
What are folks' thoughts about breaking it up into those two sort of buckets? So with regards to the, what do we do for the 26-27 year, how are we feeling about maintaining this current allocation?
I mean, I think it makes sense. I can't really think of a reason not to do that, given just the situation.
Same. And so I would move that we, recommend the same funding levels that we had in the last fiscal year.
Second that.
I would agree, but I would also, and maybe this is to the B part of it, I would like to get ahead of this for the year ahead so that in the interest of transparency and addressing needs that are within the city.
All right, so we have a first and a second for a motion to maintain for your proposed 2026-2027 funding allocation. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So that motion passes unanimously. And I guess now the next thing is how do we get ready for that September? So what are folks' thoughts about that?
Well, one, I guess we'll hear a little bit about this in the council's iteration of this discussion, for the thing that we just voted on, the 26, I've lost track, I have a political science degree, the next fiscal year. But I'm, as I think I brought up in past meetings, I'm really interested to see what, you mentioned, Director Bailey, that, the indication from the federal government was, hey, you get what you got the last time, pending some conditions. And so my thing is, it seems like you indicated that that the city attorney is sort of looking through those conditions, and I guess I take it by what you said, sort of seeing if our current programming sort of aligns with that. Should any of our programming sort of not align, I think that would be kind of like my top priority, as we're sort of looking forward into the next fiscal year, sort of seeing kind of maybe along the lines, Director Bailey, that you were mentioning earlier, seeing what other partners in the area might be able to sort of help us sort of fill the gap if, you were mentioning that Stake is has a little bit more private dollars in their hands than maybe some of the other agencies. And so, just hypothetically, seeing what sort of more privately funded, partners may be able to pick up the slack there. I'll go ahead and sort of, put my piece on the table now in terms of this sort of one lump sum or sort of, small spoonfuls to, smaller spoonfuls to each agency. I really want that to be sort of, agency led. If we are, from our position on this commission are looking down at the YOLO crisis nursery funding level and seeing that it's, $9,000 and like, ooh, that ain't a whole lot of money. But we talk to them and they say, hey, that's really necessary for this sort of part of our programming. I'm willing to sort of take their word for it, for lack of a better term. So I really, at least I don't really know if that answers the question in terms of sort of how we, go about that conversation for the next time, but I certainly want it to be as agency-led as possible. So that's at least my piece on that.
I mean, when we do the applications, do we ask in the applications what their entire funding
Yes.
picture is? And so I think that's one way we can assess too. So the application, it's really kind of long, we all, I think, would be going over, it took like hours to go over. So we do receive a lot of information from the agencies when the time comes, about their programs and, what they do and how they use the funding. And so we'll have the opportunity to review those things. But I couldn't remember if we receive information about how the CDBG funding fits within their entire funding
We asked
structure.
them for what's their agency budget,
Mhm.
and then how do you intend to spend the CDBG funds? What would your CDBG budget be?
Yeah.
And we allow them to say, this is how much we're applying for, and then this is what we would use it for. And then we always end with the hard question, if we couldn't fully fund you, what would you take?
So in that regard, I think we already I can't think of anything else to add to the already existing very thorough application process that would give us more information. And then they do come and they present on their project or their, the things that they're asking for the funding for as well, so.
And now that, you've got the liaison process too, you guys can, also the liaison can kind of weigh in on, this is what I saw, and,
Mhm.
what their opinion is, we just hope to make the decision.
Yeah.
I think I might have heard you right, Commissioner Horton, it's that I think the choice about whether we even open it up for an application is something that should be agency-led. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yeah. I don't want the decision to be sort of armchair general, where we, who of course care about all these programs, just as, not just as much, but we care about all these programs. I don't want us to sort of be making a decision sort of from our place, just from our vantage point of whether or not a smaller portion of money is sort of worth it for them, if that makes sense.
And makes sense with the amount of time that needs to go into an application like this, so, yeah, it's almost.
So I guess maybe just to sort of finish answering your question, I think it might sort of, require us to sort of bring a political phrase and, it would require us to sort of tribal it a little bit, with the community, I think, to sort of like, let them know, hey, bruh, we're in rough times, we're considering how we're going to adjust to that as a city sort of fiscally going forward, were we to sort of, only give the rose to one of y'all, would that make sense to you? Would you sort of feel okay with that being the one that was sort of left out? And if we sort of get, a bunch of feedback from these agencies saying, hey, no, we really need the little bit that you're giving us, then I think that's a good indication for me that, the approach that we've done for a little while is probably something that we should try to keep forward, even in this rough time.
And that is one thing that we talk to agencies about, is what the city's funding really does is shows that the agency has local support. So once you demonstrate that you've got the city's essentially endorsement, because we're funding you, then we expect you to go out and say to foundations, hey, they think that we're the bee's knees, you write us a check too. This is, it's to show that, we're responsible for making sure that we've done the due diligence to make sure that you are an actual 501c3, that you've got staffing and capacity, that you've got some ability to show us that you can manage public funding responsibly, because managing public funding is daunting. And you've heard me say this before, when people get excited, I'm getting federal money, and it's like, ooh, that money comes wrapped up in lots of red tape. It's really sticky, and it takes a lot. So if you've exercised that muscle and you can do that well, and we're funding you, then, foundations also see that. Oh, they've been able to manage this. Maybe they can manage what we will give them to.
So in that regard, just getting awarded the funds goes further than just the money, it's the actual demonstration of ability to manage these types of funds.
Absolutely.
Do any jurisdictions give these organizations any sort of other certificate or anything instead of a cash contribution, some sort of stamp of approval that they could use to go to get that other funding?
I haven't seen anyone provide that kind of endorsement. I've seen them determine what kind of funding they want to give. I was in a city where there were three pots of funding. There was the federal funding, there was the city's general fund, and then they had another pot of funding that was, so that the services were a little less competitive. They had a pot of funding for arts and music. So there was an arts fund. And so they didn't have to compete with everybody else that needed the services, so it kind of was less dilution. So I've seen that happen. And then I've seen, for the agencies that were providing the kind of critical needs stuff, that's where, and they aligned with what the feds were expecting. Are you meeting critical needs? Are you hitting our mandates of housing and low income and these things? Okay, you get the federal funding. If you're a service organization, but maybe you're smaller, well, we may have a little pot of general fund money, we get a little bit of amount, but the nice thing about that is there are less strings, so maybe you want to go to that category. And then if you're arts and music, it's a whole different thing. So there are cities that have considered specifically for their jurisdiction what's important to their particular community, and based on that, how they might arrange funding. So things to consider. And who knows, now, all bets are off now. So that's kind of where everyone is. I don't think that anybody that's read the paper knows that everyone is grappling with budget right now. Every city, every county, they're all grappling with what can we afford to do, because the funding has just changed.
So going back to the comment earlier that the application sort of already kind of really covers most of what we're asked, what we would even in this sort of different situation want from them, information-wise, maybe it's just a thing for us to make note of as we're engaging in this liaison outreach process, that we really, try to get as much sort of staff input from a variety of angles, maybe, if having not participated in in that before, I don't really know exactly what's expected, but, as much sort of maybe user information as we can possibly, include, just to sort of give a little bit more color to the commission as they're, reviewing, the information presented, from the applicants in the application.
And I can resend the last application process, you can just see what it looked like before. Okay. This has been really helpful.
Coming back to the getting ahead of it here, does it, as we're gonna get into fall in no time at all here to it, these things go quick. Should we just anticipate opening the bid process with a giant asterisk over all of it that contingent on allocation of funding to the?
I think this is like the last year we can push the ability to kind of roll over again. I think that for the next 27, 28 period, we would probably need to reopen. It just, if we want to make some changes to it, make those changes.
And then maybe in between now and then, if that's the direction we're gonna go, does it make, it seems like one of the things that happens in our budget is that we're trying to meet all the various city initiatives, right? And is that almost spreading us too thin just by our own thinking here to it? So I almost would wonder, do we engage in some sort of back and forth between city council, maybe they kick it back to us and any other subcommittee or any other commission to like prioritize this at this point and start to think, is there, given that this is what we're probably gonna walk into in the fall, do we need to start to prioritize it and make some tough choices?
And we've got something teed up on the agenda that kind of get us to how do we ask those questions.
And then I do think it's important that we maybe revisit the scheduling of liaison. Like, I think we need to be doubling up, and they can be concise report backs. I think they can be rich meetings, but then sort of really focused on some clear, I think I might want to hear from city council what those priorities are first. I know these things don't go quickly, but just so that can be at least a focus in those meetings. Maybe it's a summer of like liaison reports, and that's, we just buckle in and spend time sharing.
Just to clarify, we're talking about like city council's like goals and stuff like that, right?
Or we submitted our work plan to council, that still needs to be.
Oh, okay.
That would be great too, in alignment with our own commission's goals, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you were talking about having an exchange of what initiatives are a priority at city council in terms of funding for this particular pot funding.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the liaison reports later. I definitely
Great.
would love for us to redouble our
Sorry for
and
jumping
really
in.
really lock it down. But I do think so. I'm curious. Do you think that there's room for a motion? Can we ask city council to, when they talk about CDBG funds, is it May you said, or April, for them to kind of reflect back what they think for future limited CDBG and home funds? Which of the city council priorities would they like to see focused?
So when I bring this forward to council, I can say, yes, they recommended we roll over. Here are the things that were of concern to the commission. And they are open, they would really like to have council feedback on how we got here. If there's anything in particular related to our federal funded programs that they would like to see happen. You can always ask that
So I think that I'm hearing a little bit of, we'll ask council and then council will ask the commission and then so I'm not a fan of that. I think that for things like this in particular, we do look to the advisory bodies because I feel like you're going in and you're talking to the nonprofits and you sort of have that sense of what's going on in the community and what the community is asking for, and I think that's important for council to know. And I do hear this idea of, well, what are council goals for like where we want, like for instance, right now we're having a lot of discussion around the respite center and what is the city's role in addressing some of the issues that are in the community, but in order to make those decisions, we need to know what the issues are in the community. And so I think it's important, especially when you do outreach to our nonprofits. So I think that what I'm saying is for me anyway, a lot of the weight comes out of this commission for understanding what it is that the community needs. And so we just heard Director Bailey talk about how the federal government or even the state has shifted like where they want to put the emphasis on for housing or affordability or whatever. But sometimes those decisions don't line up with what our particular community needs are, and that's really frustrating. And so it's always good to know what it is that we know about our own community.
I completely agree and would want to avoid a circular conversation around this too. That's a quick way to lose a lot of time between now and September. I guess directionally where I would be interested to know is I could anticipate that we would go to every one of these organizations that we are funding and they're all going to talk about a gigantic need and that there's a high priority here to it. And so I guess I would look for some kind of a rubric or direction or something that says this is a higher priority or this is a way that we want to allocate these diminishing resources that we have access to it, and this is maybe something that we can kick out to some other funding or to say we're going to let go based on that. I guess that's where the direction I would look for, and maybe that's something we as a commission can decide, or if council wants to give us wide latitude to maybe hash that out ourselves.
So I think that one of the things to keep in mind as well is that right now we're still working on our homeless strategic plan. I mean, people are still meeting around that, and I anticipate that there'll be some direction that comes out of that. Like for instance, when we think about keeping people from falling into homelessness, then maybe things, more money to state to give people, there's a name for what they're, not vouchers,
Not
but
vouchers, but it's really emergency.
like emergency rental assistance, things like that would keep people from falling into homelessness. And then if you look at, there's a number of places on here that provide food, for instance. Maybe we say, well, we're going to send all of this to this one place for food, but I don't know. But I think that this is a discussion that we should really think about here. And like I said, there's a lot of work that's done in this commission and through Director Bailey that would inform the directions.
And just correct me if I'm wrong, like we wouldn't necessarily, with regard to item 3, we wouldn't have to necessarily come to a hard decision now, right? Okay, yeah, so I think Right, yeah, I think it's just important for us to, at this moment, kind of lay down the principles, I think, of the conversation. And then as we go forward, as, as you said rightly, Commissioner, the increasingly fast calendar that's gonna be between here and the fall. And then sort of keeping in mind, whatever those sort of foundational principles are, if we want to change the approach. Because I mean, it seems like, in terms of, decision-making process, it seems like the big question is, going back to what we were talking about before, one lump sum or sort of the continued approach, from, that we've been, in the past little while is sort of, what we might think of as smaller amounts to a bunch of different agencies. And so, I think I'll just say for me, the only way that I would sort of feel comfortable sort of moving to that sort of different approach than the one that we're doing now is if we're talking about a real drastic, a real we're talking about 40% or more, where we're, and then that sort of makes sense. If we are moving from, what we would think of as sort of last fiscal year's funding levels as like 100%, and we're moving from that to 80, that is rough. That, 100 to 80% is rough. But that's, I think, something where we're talking about, okay, everybody's getting a cut, versus sort of where we're changing the approach altogether, right? And so I feel like, if as we're sort of moving through this year of requests and sort of seeing how the federal government responds to that, if it's sort of drastically different in a negative way, relative to what we're expecting, then I think that sort of, we don't have a choice at that point. It's not even really like a substantive conversation. It's like we have to change the approach because the in-stream sort of support has changed so significantly. But if it's what we would think of as sort of a rough but manageable sort of change, then then I think, what is it, proportionate sort of responses would sort of, make sense in that situation.
I mean, I think looking at the whole pot in terms of like if we want to allocate a whole lot to one agency, I mean, the whole pot is only 109,000. So even if you gave like 50% to one organization, like that's still not even enough to fund a whole staff person, so just thinking of it that way, the benefit of, like Dana said, Director Bailey said, about getting the funds and demonstrating ability to manage them, maybe spreads the love in terms of at least that, that ability to demonstrate that. And that might go further than like someone getting a little bit extra and then someone losing out completely. And also just to note, when the organizations apply, they don't exactly, it's not like they ask for these amounts per se. A lot of times they will say like, I want the whole pot, and then we will make the decision on how much to allocate.
And so we don't, because again, when we get to regular items, if we were trying to think about what kind of process we want to go about doing this, maybe that's something that we can address.
Okay, so I'm hearing the next steps will be redoubling our efforts for liaison contacts and then doing some sort of gap analysis, speaking to meeting people who maybe are not current recipients, organizations.
Really, Dana, I don't know if I got, did you send the emails with the contacts of the liaisons?
Yes, I did, so I'll resend it though. But
Okay,
I
thank
do
you.
have it up to them. But
Thank you.
I'll be on, I mean,
All right, any other discussion items here? Okay, so that'll conclude the public hearing for that part. Okay, now on to the informational items. We have a presentation from Hardy Davis.
So, we, as you know, we had a pilot program for a safe parking program. Park Davis is here to kind of provide their experience of running our safe park. Yeah. That's fine.
Hello, I'm Shoshana Zatz. I'm the president of Heart of Davis. And I was sitting here thinking just just from a historical perspective, I served on the very first Social Services Commission back in the early 90s when it was first created. And one of the main reasons that it was created was that before then, City Council had to wade through all those CDBG proposals and listen to the presentations. And at that time, we had to get letters of recommendation from the community members. And that was before email and internet, so there were like these big, huge binders. So just in case you're wondering, you are serving a good purpose. So we are Heart of Davis. You probably have heard of us. We're a community nonprofit serving people who are experiencing homelessness in Davis and in the broader Yolo County. We started as the Interfaith Rotating Winter Shelter in 2007. And that lasted for about 13 years, where during the winter, different faith-based organizations hosted the winter shelter on a weekly basis. When COVID came, that was not possible anymore, so we transitioned to Heart of Davis, and we've been providing, coordinating hot meals for the winter shelter guests for several years, including the motel guests in the non-congregate shelter. And we provide a monthly lunch at the Respite Center. Tomorrow we're doing the big St. Patrick's Day feast. And we also advocate for policies and regulations to improve the quality of life for homeless people. We're
Because I read your presentation, you let me know when you want to move forward.
Yes, do it now. And we are an all-volunteer organization. We do have a very, very part-time staff person for safe parking, but other than that, we're all volunteer, and we receive no funding from the city or the state or the federal government. It's all community donations. Okay. So Safe Parking Program, like its name implies, it's a safe place for people who are living in their vehicles to park and sleep overnight so that they're not disturbed or harassed during the night, so that they don't get ticketed or towed. And it provides really the only legal option that exists in the city to avoid violating the anti-camping ordinance. And it connects the parkers as a home base. The Safe Parking Program also connects the parkers to resources and case management so that they can move forward beyond homelessness, hopefully. We studied this for over a year and talked to a bunch of other safe parking programs throughout the state and pulled out the best practices. And then we launched the pilot in July, early July 2025. We have been, up until now, allowed 5 overnight parking spaces, so 5 cars, and there can be multiple people in the cars. The council recently approved an ordinance that is going to allow us to expand to 8 spaces, we hope. And we'd like to know when and how we can do that. The parkers can be there from 7 p.m. to 9 a.m. We have over 70 volunteers involved from nonprofits and faith-based organizations and UC Davis. All the volunteers have to agree to a code of conduct so that we are establishing boundaries from both the parkers' side and the volunteer side. Your turn.
I'm Alice Aldis, I'm a park board member. So as far as support for the participants, they're screened and interviewed before they're given a parking pass and are involved. They also have a strict code of conduct. And it's a requirement to be engaged with some kind of case management. We've kind of evolved. There were things we learned that were more important that we weren't stressing and things like that. But Turning Point Common Good Community or the Institute on Aging, they are required 30 days after being accepted to have a valid driver's license, registration, and car insurance. And recently we've started giving them $50 in gas cards at the beginning of each month. Sometimes there's a fair amount of time spent moving around to find a place to be after 9/11. The site features are that it's secure. That's our goal. We have a portable restroom and trash. They check in with one group of volunteers in the evening and they check out in the morning with another group. We work on having it be quiet and respectful for the neighbors. So I go around town, I can't think of very many places. I'm pondering the respite center, there are just so few places to put things, and so there are going to be neighbors. And then one of the fun things is we've become neighbors with the parkers. By the time we have the hospitality hour and you're there several times a week, hear what's going on, how cold it is, how their pet is doing, or a lot of things like that, and their snacks, warm soup, like breakfast, and as many items as we can for their convenience. Tylenol, just whatever comes up, there are a lot of different things. Some of the partnerships are with the City of Davis for permits and policy support, local faith-based organizations and nonprofit organizations, then the social service providers offering case management. There are volunteers both from the community and UC Davis, and then we receive referrals from DCMH. Okay. The Respite Center, Grace in Action, St. Vincent de Paul, Fourth and Hope, State, and the Board of Supervisors in the City of Davis. And there's a community too, and a communication so people hear about it. We do work at trying to have it be confidential. Davis is a small town. My friend used to tell her children not to do anything they didn't want her to hear about because there was a mother underground. There's also a homeless underground, maybe several other kinds. Then we have found ourselves interacting with other partnerships, some of which weren't necessarily anticipated. Mobile Med, Communicare, St. Vincent de Paul, veterinary clinics, mobile mechanic. You can imagine how important that is if your home is what is not working that day. YOLO Healthy Aging Alliance and other local resources. And we're just trying to start a shower program with California House. So those are some of the things we're doing right now.
So some outcomes, we ask when we interview the applicants on a scale of 1 to 10, how safe do you feel now? And all of them within a month usually have increased that score. They report feeling much more secure and stable. They feel like they're being seen and heard. It's an isolated kind of life sometimes, being homeless, and they don't engage in the same conversations that perhaps the rest of us do. But in this setting, we all just sit around and chat and laugh and listen to music and talk about the world's events. So there's been some trusting relationships that have developed. And there have been no neighbor complaints, and that was the main issue when we first started. That was the main fear, was that we were going to disturb the neighbors. Instead, the neighbors are really disturbing us. Because they're sometimes very loud. The Parkers have said that because they're required to be in a case management program, they feel like there's more hope and direction than when they first entered. It's an older population. The average age is 62. We have Parkers between the ages of 29 and 78. And many of them have older pets as well, 17-year-old dogs and so on. We, so far, the financial donations from the community are keeping pace with what we're spending. Hopefully that will continue. We're embarking on a grant writing campaign now. So 30 people have been interviewed in total. 17 people were admitted into the program. 12 have left the program. As you can see, 5 moved into housing, 3 were asked to leave due to code of conduct violations. 3 left and just didn't tell us where they were going, and 1 became ill and was hospitalized. The 4 of the remaining Parkers have been there approximately 6 to 7 months, and we have a brand new person starting today. And we have 5 people on the waiting list. So in the future, we hope to add additional host sites. That was another thing that the ordinance has allowed. We, in the future, could have up to 5 host sites at various faith-based organizations. We are talking with UC Davis about potentially creating a student-only safe parking program, because we are hearing that many students are spending the night in their cars because they can't afford to live here and they live too far away to commute every day. Expanding from 5 to 8 parking spaces, like I said before. Continued collaboration, of course. More volunteers, hopefully, and fundraising through grants and donations. And that's it. Questions? Do you have any questions?
What a great program. I was gonna ask, I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but I'm just curious, like, what is the, I guess it's not, I mean, it's sort of a household composition, but you mentioned some age, but do you have like families? Is it mostly single people? You said multiple, it could be.
Yeah, we've had a few couples, and we have had very temporary children. We've had 1 or 2 nights with a family with two very young children. One night with a woman who had a 5-month-old baby, but we managed to get her a motel room the next day. So, yeah, but mostly single.
Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned, you have plans to expand to host sites, and then did you say that you can only expand to 5 additional sites, or what is the limits though?
That is what the ordinance.
You can only have 5 safe parking sites in Davis?
At this time.
And then and then the max is like 8 per site or something?
8 per site,
Okay.
yeah. Maybe that can change in the future, but we're very happy to have the ordinance, because it signifies that we're a permanent organization, program rather than pilot.
Do you guys have nonprofit status?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, kudos about the organization and how great of a service that it provides in the community. I'm just down the street, so I can also say that the neighbors, have no complaints. Me and my dog walk by frequently.
But don't tell anyone where it is.
Yes. Let's see, I have to ask the standard question, any support that the city could provide, you know, that we aren't already, that would be important?
I mean, we would take your money.
Yes.
Volunteers.
Yeah, volunteers, if there was a way to funnel some volunteers to our program, that would be wonderful. Just continued, the homeless outreach folks do refer people to us, and that has been very helpful. Continue to support us. We will flounder if we don't continue to have volunteers and community donations.
Okay, yeah, no, I think Commissioner Ennis, who unfortunately isn't with us this evening, is one of your volunteers.
No, but she's a very avid supporter.
Yeah, big supporter, big fan.
Yeah.
And so you got into it just now, and it was a little bit in the report. I'm just wondering a little bit more about like what the outreach is like to potential, also, what are you calling them, guests?
Parkers.
Parkers, okay.
Parkers.
What the outreach like to you, I think both of y'all mentioned referrals from different agencies. Is that mostly it, or what's the outreach like?
Yes, mostly we're getting referrals from the agencies we mentioned. We have done a fair amount of flyering across the city, and our Google Voice number is out there. So we do get calls from potential parkers as well, who are not affiliated with any of those organizations. We don't have we don't have an outreach program per se.
Thank you. And, you know, as somebody who's, you know, my car is always busted and broke down, I'm wondering, has eligibility in terms of like registration and things like that, has it ever been an issue for?
It's always an issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so,
That would be another area of support, because sometimes you can help people get up to snuff.
right, and that was, yeah, you got right to it, that's why we pay you the big bucks. You know, because you mentioned the partnership with, I believe it was Mobile Mechanic, and so obviously that's a different sort of area, but it, you know, it sort of makes me think about like sort of maybe what other community organizations there are that might be able to help with something like that, particularly to help to get somebody's on the last leg of eligibility, registration wise. So maybe that's a, you know, conversation for us to sort of put our thinking caps on a little bit about. Were you gonna say something? I'm sorry.
Nope.
Okay. Let's see. You mentioned that there was the slide about the numbers. I think that was just right before this. But just any more thoughts about here it is, about how Parkers have successfully been able to uptake or utilize services?
Through the case management, we are connected with 3 enhanced care management organizations, CalAIM organizations. So the case managers they are referring them to some of the local resources. But we have done the same. We've had mobile medicine come to our site to look at a couple of people who were not feeling well and who were using the hospital emergency room as their primary care. We've had veterinary services. We tell them where all the food is, all the free food. So we're doing a lot of referring, and the case managers are as well.
Thank you. And then so last question, which you got into it a second ago. It seems like, you know, the waiting list, I think y'all said, well, you have 5 people on the waiting list. Is there like a timeline to these sort of other sites being set up? And, you know, I imagine there's a yearning for that. I just wanted to sort of see if there was any news on that front.
Ask her. No, we are talking with another faith-based organization that wants to open a second site. The volunteers are kind of the blocking point. We need to make sure we have enough volunteers before we open a new site. I think it will be quite some time before we have more than 2 of those sites.
How many volunteers do you need? Like, how many do you currently have?
We have a, roster of about 70, but the repeat volunteers, there's about 35 of them. So
How many people do you need on site each night, for example, or
2.
in one shift or whatever?
Each shift is 2 people, so 2 people in the evening and 2 people in the morning.
And are they there all night?
No,
We do have some volunteers who just drive through to make an attempt to
to monitor.
spread the message that somebody's paying attention. But, so it's about 28 volunteer slots in a week.
Yeah, yeah. And most people don't, most people do repeat, they, once a week or once every other week. If any of you are interested in volunteering, I could set that up for you.
What's the schedule?
Evenings is 6:50 to 8 p.m. Mornings, 7:50 to 9 a.m.
It's just about an hour.
An hour and 10 minutes, yeah. Yeah, it's pretty quick. And
I was
it's
imagining like all night.
yeah, no, you don't have to stay awake all night.
Pulling all night.
Could I ask simply, how would a volunteer get in contact with you?
heartofdavis@gmail.com.
You do have a, I checked the
Yeah.
website. Great, thank you.
Now, if you and your dog want to walk by sometime, anytime, 9 p.m. and 3 a.m.
Just gotta pick out a slot.
Right,
We'll just know, we'll tell you what to look for.
Right.
all right?
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you so much for your time. And yes, we are in the process of getting them their new permit that allows them to operate for longer now that the ordinance has been passed. We're past the 30-day period. So we can now get them what they need to kind of operate for the next year.
Is the application available?
So the application is available with the snags that I've run into. So before, the application was through the Parks Department, and so they have their own application process. We now have it coming through our department. We're also in the process of changing the website so that we've got to make it more accessible. So we had a way that you could do a fill-in online application. We're now, as a city, we're having to change some of that so it's more accessible to folks. So I'm gonna get you a hard copy instead until I
That's
can,
fine.
I'll just send you the hard copy so you can fill it out and get it back to us. But once we get that settled, it'll be on the website and people can see the guidelines, see the application, recommendations and all of that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
All right, so item 8 is regular items, so first, subcommittee reports. I don't
Yes.
think there are any. are there?
No, we don't have any of those, and let me see. We're gonna go back to looking at. Okay. So I wanted to, pull up our meeting calendar for the year, because that's how we kind of look at the long range. But I'm thinking that it might help if I were to show you the entire work plan that we're submitting. Okay, so, this is in draft because, thank you. This is in draft because we, since you completed your work plan and the things that you intended to work on, there's now a format that the city clerk has given us so that council can see uniformly when a commission is asking for, is submitting its work plan, it's a uniform process. So I took that work plan that you had before and kind of transferred it over to this process And so what I'll be submitting to council is, this is from the Social Services Commission, here's their purpose and function, here are the tasks that they said that they would like to take on this year. And we've got all of those things that were in the previous work plan that you had, all the tasks you talked about. And you can see here, we provide council with kind of here are the things that we do on an annual basis when those things happen. When we have subcommittees, we'll fill those in, but we're waiting to fill that in until after council can kind of look at these tasks and go, this is where we a direction we prefer to see you go in, and then you might want to develop your subcommittees based on what you hear back. And then there's this calendar that this is this year's calendar so far. So where we are is March, and then what I've plugged in here are where we had liaison reports that we said that we were going to try and get to. Those are the ones that are in the italics. And where we thought that we might do that. And then some potential items on the bottom. I'm sorry, this is tiny, and I wish I could figure out how to make it bigger, but I don't want to make it go away, but you can see it.
All tools might go away. Inside of the all tools, it might let you make it a little bit bigger. No, the X, right? Yeah.
There we go. And then when I'm done with this, I don't need this. There we go. That's a little bit better.
On the bottom, the magnifying glass. Thank you.
There we go. Does that help? And we can
Yeah,
just
we
go,
can
we
read
can
it.
get right out of the January, that's done, February is done. We are in March, and you can see, we go here, we had originally, where we were thinking we would be plugging people in for some of these liaison reports. That's what's here too. So, and you can see that we recessed here. I didn't plan anything for August, so that's kind of open. And then we've got, if we go through our normal process, where the NOFA would show up, the Technical Assistance Forum, maybe what we do in December, and then here are the items that were things that you were interested in reviewing. The Affordable Housing Ordinance, Rental Resources Program, how is the Respite Center working, how are things going, the Housing Trust Fund, mental health clinicians, to hear from the mental health clinicians, and then to hear from the county on what they're thinking in social services, how things are going with social services. So those are the things that we're proposing to council that we want to kind of take on. And then once we hear back, we can start kind of plugging in, where should those things be? Are we gonna create some subcommittees to look at specific things? 2 years ago, there was a subcommittee that looked at the affordable rental ordinance. So if the homeownership ordinance is one thing, or if we want to look at the whole thing based on what we hear from council. And then here are the have-tos. So, thinking about those things when we're creating our calendar. So, and then just so you can, as a reminder, these are the tasks that you kind of gave yourselves. The Affordable Housing Ordinance, strengthening the Rental Resources Program, understanding what's happening at the Respite Center, and asking some questions about that. Looking at the Housing Trust Fund, and reviewing what's coming in and how we're using it. We were looking at camping and safe parking programs, but we just had that one. And then I gave the Social Services Department annual presentation in February.
I'm sorry, 6, should that say task 6?
Oh, it should, I'm sorry, you're right, thank you. I'll go in and reorder those before I send out the staff report, thank you very much.
The other ones are.
There we go. And then we wanted to hear from the embedded clinician at the police department. And then finally, more about what's happening on a county basis. So that's this format is going to go on council's consent calendar for April 7th. We were bumped from tomorrow, so it'll go on the 7th. And then once council okays, then it'll come back and you guys can decide, okay, where do we want to tackle things? And that's when we'll start plugging them into this calendar. So what I will do is every meeting, I'll pull up this calendar and we can adjust things as we see fit. But seeing it this way, that kind of, the conversation you were having before about, you know, what's our timeline? How tight is the timeline? And working backwards, what do we want to do when, given some of the other items that are also on our plate.
Do we want to decide that now? Or you're just telling us we'll have to decide this?
My recommendation is you might want to see if there's any more feedback from councils, because the work plan's going up. If they have any feedback, then we can apply it. If they don't, then it's green light, go for all the next things.
So get feedback first.
Get feedback first. And you'll have that before your next meeting.
I just wanted to clarify, so the last commission meeting, Director Bailey, you were telling us that there was some sort of like question with regard to like commission work plans overall that was being sort of set. Is that what this is?
That's what this is.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
I just
that
wanted
was-
to
yeah, that's what this is.
be
Yeah.
sure, okay.
Yeah, the discussion was is how do we get the information uniformly so that, you know, it doesn't look different in different ways. And so the city clerk provided this format for us, for all the commissions to use.
Okay, and so I just wanted to clarify, it sounds like that's what you're saying,
Yeah.
that there's no sort of further holdup to,
No.
okay, all right.
So this will go forward, again, it goes forward on the 7th. And so I'll have the, response by your meeting on the 15th. Hold on a minute. 20th, next meeting is April 20th, so. But these are the topics on the table that you selected from the last meeting. Okay. Close this, we can hope for the best. Use this, reduce this, and bring this back up. Okay. Oh, I did have. Sorry, I'll make you dizzy. Here it is.
Yeah.
This is what I sent out, so you could see, who selected which thing.
Yeah.
And then what they were funded. So I'll resend this out just to make sure you have it, but these are the agencies that we're funded before and who the liaison
I mean, what about the contact information? I
Yeah.
mean, I know who my person could be to reach
Yeah.
out there, but I don't know if everyone has that.
And I'll send that out to everyone too, because the agency's got, here's your liaison, here's what to expect. But I'll resend you guys, here's a contact, here's the report format that you can use, so you all have that too.
Thank you, Director Bailey.
I hate to put the time
No.
limit on it.
Mhm.
I'm on a school schedule and there's
Oh.
a spring break coming.
Oh.
And it would just be
Oh.
so convenient to get a visit in and thus get all the things done to
Mhm.
meet a May deadline. To report.
Okay. Well, if there's a month or a time that works best for you, you can let me know.
I would love to go visit my liaison place, the crisis nursery, in the first week of April, so
Okay.
that I can come to this commission in May with
All right.
a report.
Okay, I will make sure that you have your information tomorrow.
Perfect.
Okay. For those things, that shows you the long-range calendar. Okay. So, public comments. All right, so, I'll move us forward. Okay.
And also, I mean, we had, Sarah, you were gonna do it in March, do you wanna go in April, we could both go? I'm not tied, I don't need to.
Yeah, I
do it in
mean,
April, we could shift things
There's
around.
some similar, I have the same kind of
Yes.
scheduling issues. Yeah, so as soon as I can, yeah, as soon as we have
You were,
contacts. I could also go later and just.
I'll send them to everyone and you can just let me know. And then
Perfect.
also, you'll need to talk to your organization to see when they're available as well.
Exactly, yeah, good point.
And I mean, one could always do the visit, write up the report, and then present at whatever month.
I think we're gonna have 2 or 3 for sure, for a series of meetings.
I'll resend those out tomorrow so you guys can make
Thank
decisions.
you so much.
Mhm.
Appreciate that.
Are we communicating now?
Yeah, yes, yes, we're communicating now, so.
Yeah, so any community events or other announcements that commissioners want to share?
Attended any meetings or
Yeah.
anything like that?
Okay.
Right, then I'll move forward with, I'm going to start with an item that I, want to bring back about a development project. Last month, we heard from, the Willow Grove project. They came and spoke about their, plans for creating affordable housing. We've recently, understood that they've picked another affordable housing developer to partner with on their project. We're still in the process of developing their design agreement, development agreement, thank you very much, for the overall project. So part of that overall project is their ability to create affordable housing. And so as we're having those negotiations, one of the things that they announced to us is that they're moving forward with a different developer. So I spoke with the city attorney because I explained that they'd already presented to you with one method. And I asked, is it possible for the developer to come back and explain what the change is? And she said that, yes, that's fine. I believe that the planning commission meeting is April, sometime we did it. Yeah, in April. So if the commission is interested in hearing from the developer, more from the developer about the change, what that entails, we would probably have to conduct a special meeting to bring them forward and ask them questions if you have any. Because you made a recommendation based on one thing. And it's up to you if you have the option to have a special meeting so they can address just the affordable housing piece. Or when they come forward to the planning commission, you can hear the change at the planning commission meeting when they're making the decisions. Do you want?
I missed which development project.
It was Willow Grove. It's the. Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember exactly.
The one
where
last
they are,
time?
but they, exactly where the project is
It was
located.
across
Complete
from
one.
Harvard. They were still all in.
You remember where, so, they were coming forward because they were going to partner with Mutual Housing to, create the affordable housing. And with Alta Regional to have some units, specifically for people with developmental
Right.
disabilities. They're still intending to create 250 affordable units. And they're only required to do 141, but they're still committed to the 250. It's just they've changed the developer that they intend to do that with. And my understanding is they still intend to partner with Alta Regional for the developmental disabled units too. But it's just they've made a change for development. So
That's the big question. I'm sorry, what I was gonna say is I think I think we have a big interest, in sort of hearing this, and, if that requires us doing a little bit of logistical work in a special meeting, I'm 100% okay with that. There is, anybody who's talked to anybody about development issues in Davis knows that there's sort of a trust deficit and sort of a feeling of bait and switch with regard to development projects. And so I feel like what a lot of folks feel like is that these sort of changes happen sort of outside of an opportunity for public scrutiny and public accountability. And so I think any ability that we have to sort of have those conversations in public, should changes occur, even, to whatever, opinions people have about the degree of the change here. So yeah, I just want to sort of, say that I definitely think that we should go forward with having a special meeting if that's necessary to hear the change. And just that we also just establish a precedent that if something like this occurs in the future, that we're going to try to schedule a meeting to hear about sort of what the changed circumstances are.
And what other feelings about a special meeting? Or thoughts?
I guess I'm curious about yeah, we don't know what the changes are, because if it's the same number of units, then, okay, we're okay on that front, but like, it was a very nice design, is that whole all changing too?
So, with the new partner, they are further along, and from what we've seen, they've got a site plan for it stays in the same location on their map. But how the affordable units will be built, they're expecting that the developer that they work with will be building those units, and they're expecting the timeline may be accelerated, but there are more details that would probably be better answered by the developer.
Yeah, I mean, an accelerated timeline sounds good, but we spoke with them, 3 weeks ago, and mutual housing was a very significant part of their presentation and their plan. So, yeah. So I think it would be worth trying to. What sort of direction do you need from us to get that going, and how can we help with the scheduling part?
If what I can do is we have probably about 4 weeks in which to schedule another meeting with them. It will be a public meeting, like this one is, and I can find when there's availability for this room, and then ask them to come and just meet at your convenience between now and mid-April. Because having the meeting before the planning commission, so you are clear about what's happening and can address it if questions come up.
That sounds good. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, when I have some dates and times, I'll get those out to you guys and we'll those down. And I think I don't have anything in addition. We don't have any new homes that have gone on the market. We haven't had any sell in our portfolio either, so right now we're kind of in a holding pattern. And we are still, through our social services and housing, we're still working on council's request that we see what we can do related to the respite center. What we are clear about is that we will be able to maintain what we have at the respite center through June 30th. We've identified a funding source to maintain that staffing, and then we're still doing some legwork on potential locations, but we should have more information, I'm hoping, by no later than in April. I don't think I have anything new for the department itself.
I just have a request, and this sort of drawing us back to the past conversation. I apologize, I didn't think of this at the time. For those of us not brave enough to attend lengthy council meetings, is it possible for you to, once the city attorneys have taken a look and done the analysis about to what degree our current programming with regard to the community development funds, sort of meets these new conditions, is it possible for you to send whatever sort of staff report is sort of created from that to us once it's created? just so that we don't have to brave a city council meeting deep into the night to hear what it's about, or just to see it.
So, give me an example, like.
So, I'm sorry, just like, you know, I know sometimes when there's like a staff report that goes to city council that's relevant to this commission, you'll sometimes send it to us, you know, just so that we can be aware of it.
Okay,
And whatever sort of staff report is developed for council for the item that they're gonna see, you know, similar to ours, I would hope that you could send it to us so that we could see, particularly again, my interest is, or as I assume other commissioners are interested in, is to what degree our current programming meets whatever these new conditions are from HUD.
okay. So generally what I try to do is if I'm sending something, like with the respite center, when that came forward, I try to let you guys know when it's happening, and once we publish, I try and send that to you too, or let you know where you can find it. So yeah, I'll make that a habit, so that anytime I've got something going forward to them, and once it's been approved and we know for sure it's gonna get published, I make sure that you have it too.
Thank you.
That's all I've got for that, so.
All right, any public comment on item 9? All right. So it's 8:40 and the meeting for today is adjourned. We'll see you all probably before April 20th, a special meeting, but if not, see you then. Thank you, Gardner Daly.
Good job, Sherry, you got it right, like, you got it right the